to Freshly Forever, a podcast that gives you fascinating insights week after week. Here's your host, Vi Kumar.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode on podcast Freshly Forever. Our guest, Emma Fishman, is the staff photographer at Bon Appetit magazine. Her work focuses on food, people, and product skills. Emma has freelanced for companies like Bragg's Vinegar, Super Coffee, and Atlanta Magazine. She loves helping bring her clients' visions to life, as she was initially a visuals editor. She's always excited to work collaboratively and enjoys meeting new, creative, and talented people. And welcome, Emma, to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Okay, it appears you were exposed a lot to art since you were very young. Emma, can you talk about how, as a family, you guys approached it all?
Yeah, so my parents since I was born have collected photography, mostly contemporary, like 60s onward. And I feel like we definitely weren't like normal families. Like we would always go to museums. My parents knew like everyone at the art galleries. And I feel like as a kid, we were actually all talking about this the other day. As a kid, I think I was just absorbing it, but also, I wanted to be like at Disney World where all my friends were. And, I feel like now I can see what a special experience that was. And I really think that we were absorbing it. My sister too she's a publicist for artists. So like obviously somewhere along the way it clicked for the two of us. So yeah, my dad would always just like show me books on different people. And I think from an early age, I was like, I'm going to go to school to be a photographer. Like once I figured out that you didn't have to be like in business or marketing, like that was actually a career, I was really excited because I was in high school and I was like, wait, I can actually have a fun job that I enjoy. I thought that was really cool for an option.
Yeah, the fact that you could do something different and not be like a cookie cutter, whatever the rest of the friends were doing. Yeah, that's awesome. So you talked about visiting museums and the collections that the family kind of, brought with. So what prompted an interest in photography?
I feel like my dad really pushed it, not in a bad way, but I think that he saw that I was interested. He gave me all of his old cameras. We would, take photos together. And I feel like in maybe the third grade, I entered a reflections program, that like the PTA like puts on across the country. And I think I saw like a Cindy Sherman photo that I loved and I wanted to like emulate that as a third grader. And I did. And then I won the whole thing.
The contest. How nice.
And the only photo in the entire house that's like one of ours, because people come in and they're like, there's no family pictures in here. Like there's small photos like my parents have in their room and I have small photos in our room, but like any art displayed is not mine. It's not any of theirs. They collect, it's artists. But the only one is that photo that's outside my bedroom. And my dad always loves to show people that one. He's like, this is the only photo hanging on these walls that's one of us.
Oh, why not? And art reflections, isn't that a cool thing? Like as right from elementary until end of high school, you get to participate in that. And I always feel that just brings out the best in kids. And I'm glad you got to be a part of that. And what about your educational background? If you can talk about that and how that's coming in handy as far as what you do on a daily basis with your profession.
Yeah, so I went to Emerson College in Boston. It was a small liberal arts school right in the heart of Boston. So I'm from Marietta, Georgia. So I really wanted to get out and do something, in a city. And Boston is just an amazing college town. You meet so many people. That was the first time that I was like exposed to people my age who were really creative and were in so many different fields. Like that was really eye-opening. I feel that you're not taught in school that there's all of these creative fields. Like even now, I'm still learning about all of these random jobs. Like especially, I didn't know that there were like food stylists. Like that's a career path, you know? It's
Yeah,
like
I
that's
mean,
so
I'm learning
yeah.
something here.
Yeah, it's just, there's a lot of really cool creative fields out there that you're not necessarily exposed to in a small town, So I went to school for visual media arts. So I did a lot of film classes, which was awesome, but I knew that I wanted to be in photography. So I got a minor in photography and it was mostly shot with like film. It was small classes. So you really connected with the professor and it was just exciting to like present your art. I mean, that was definitely like a very specific aesthetic that I don't think I have anymore, which is a good thing, which is like the college, like artsy, um, aesthetic that's just
Mm-hmm.
very like sad girl and like very tight and what you think is professional, but there's so many different avenues of photography that you can explore.
Mm-hmm.
So my education was great, no complaints. It was awesome. I had a really good time. I learned a lot. And then actually that's how I got my current job was the old staff photographer at Bon Appetit. He went to Emerson. So we connected and I became the photo assistant at Bon Appetit, like right after I graduated, which was
Mm-hmm.
crazy because I feel very lucky that there are people still my age who don't really know what they want to do. And right out the gate, I was exposed to something that just really clicked, which is the food world. And also, while my parents are art collectors, they're huge in food.
Mm-hmm.
I was exposed to all different restaurants. It was always like, you have to try it once. I was very fortunate that we would travel to different countries and be exposed to all those different cuisines. I'm my parents are awesome. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
I think at the time, like you're a kid and you see all these people doing like normal things and you're kind of like weird because your parents are taking you, you know, not to Florida. They're taking you to Italy. Like now it's like, of course, that's amazing. That's such a privilege. But at the time, it was just hard to like see that that was such a special thing that not everyone gets to do. So my education in food too was really uh, extensive my whole life, just trying different restaurants. My dad is an amazing cook.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to brag here, and I'm an amazing cook now,
Oh,
which,
that's fantastic.
yeah, so food is a huge part of who I am. So it's amazing that like my two interests, like growing up, my dad's interest is now my career, which he's like absolutely elated on.
Oh, fantastic, Emma. And I can tell, no matter how you felt as a teenager, I mean, I know you felt good, but you were like kind of, oh, why am I not going to Florida? But I'm
Yeah.
going elsewhere, like, unlike
Yeah,
different people or exploring so much food. But I can
exactly.
tell right in front of me here, I'm able to see on camera a very happy millennial, and
Yeah.
kudos to your parents.
Yeah,
And
they did a good
it's
job.
just, oh, yeah, I mean, I can tell. And I'm just very, very happy to say here that your work has been featured on the cover in Bon Appetit. And uh, it just seems like all of your experience and the travel worldwide and your involvement with places and food, has just kind of made you like a well rounded person as such. And what's your current involvement like, an area of interest?
So specifically, it changes because when I first started, I was the assistant, but I also was like, I shoot. I love to shoot. That's like my main goal here. I made that really clear to my employers. And luckily, a photo editor was like, okay, sure, you can go shoot this thing for Healthyish, which is one of our websites. And I became like the portrait photographer. Like I loved portraits. That's what I did like in college. And I for Healthyish specifically, it was basically shooting women in food, which was so cool because I would, for a whole work day, I would get to go to someone's home and just speak to them and connect with them and then take a picture and then see it on a website. So that
Mm-hmm.
was really awesome. So I still love doing portraits. I feel like when before the pandemic, I loved shooting at restaurants. Like there's just so much energy. I loved hanging out with chefs and interacting with people who are eating and are curious of what you're doing. I thought that was so cool. And just the fast paced kitchen was always really exhilarating. So I loved doing that. I have not done that in a year,
Oh yeah, I mean,
unfortunately.
I don't blame you.
I have not done that really in a year. And then I feel like when I first started, I was like, I don't really like studio photography that much. It just seemed really intimidating to me, and I didn't really want to like face that challenge. But the more I was on set and the more I learned about it, I was like, this isn't scary. I can just do whatever I want. And so now I love doing studio photography. And I also, as a visuals editor, I really was hands-on. So as a visuals editor, you learn what looks good. So if you're shooting like a pasta dish and you see this one specific noodle that just doesn't look right, you need to be like to the food stylist, can you take this noodle out? And then, you get a better shot. I don't know why. It's very nuanced. You learn it, it's you learn it by physically being there. Like I can't explain it. So that was really helpful as I started to transition to being a full-time food photographer, because it's important that like what is going to give you a better image at the end.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you talked about visual editor, and so how does your role as visuals editor help with fulfilling your client expectations better? And I know you also
Mhm.
do, other than photography of food, you also do like things and places and
Mhm.
portraiture and all of that, right? So,
Yeah, so as a visuals editor, you're the one who's kind of directing the set. And that means also too, like, because I've started off doing smaller web shoots where you don't necessarily have a prop stylist. You have to use what we have. We had a pretty big like selection, but still it was fun to like mix and match and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And I apply that now to any shoot that I'm on, knowing like how
mhm,
to. It's just a very helpful skill to when you don't have a prop stylist who they're really irreplaceable. Prop stylists are amazing, and it's
mhm,
like it's the hardest job of the whole set. I think. Well, a food stylist too, but prop stylist, like there's a lot of physical interaction with
mhm,
you know um, carrying things and packing things up. It's a hard job, but it's
mhm,
just fun to know what looks right, what looks good. Like for example, I was shooting last week. We had to do step by steps for this like zucchini bread cake. Um,
mhm,
and, no one was there. It was just me and my food stylist. And, I had to prop it while making it look like a kitchen, which is hard to do. You
mhm.
can't just throw like, at least at Bon Appetit, we don't just throw like an ingredient on the surface. It needs to look like it was used. So I took a carton of eggs that I knew I was going to peek in, and I cracked a few of them open because it was in the recipe. I think you used 3 eggs, and I peeked that in, and
Mhm.
it looked great. Or I think there was a zest of one lemon, and I peeked that in, and that looked great. So it's just fun to like mix and match, and I think that really helps with my clients, that you don't just get a photographer, you get someone who can make the image better. And I think a lot of companies now, at least who I work with, really are looking for an image that looks realistic. I think that's the whole Bon
Mhm.
Appetit style, where it looks like you could cook it, and that's pretty much, I think we finesse it a little better than a home cook would, I hope. But still, it
Mhm.
looks realistic and achievable. And I think a lot of brands are looking for that.
Oh, absolutely. I think for me, from a consumer end, say as a person sitting at home, and if I were to browse through a magazine, like first, I think it's the visual appeal that matters, right? You
Yeah.
first eat with your eyes, and then, you physically want to make it, and then, you want to devour that food. But yeah, what you said makes total sense there. What is it that clients look for, you think, when they approach you? And do you like stepping out of your comfort zone? Have you ever had to do it?
It's definitely a hard thing to do, to step out of your comfort zone. Like I feel like this is my job. So it gets very easy to like go with the flow. I mean, you look at trends like Instagram, I have a
Mhm.
whole saved like folder, I think that photos, no one can miraculously come up with an image. Like there are, you look at tons of images, especially now where, all day long I'm just looking at my phone. I know I'm not the only one who does this. Um, so yeah, I feel like stepping out of your comfort zone is really hard. I feel like I get streaks of inspiration, of curiosity, of moving a light here, seeing what will happen. How can I make this look more, like a specific time of day? But I think that there is an evolution, and I can see it even if I look back at like a years of work. Um, I'm not My work hasn't been stagnant. It always is changing. So I think that it's not more of like a one moment of like, oh, you push yourself out of this comfort zone and you have created something all new. Like I think it happens in smaller bursts than just one moment of like genius. I think it happens gradually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think even earlier you mentioned, right, like from being a visuals editor to, like working on the set and things like that, that also I think was your first step to having to come out of your comfort zone because, you just wanted to be out and about doing stuff. But, you were on a set and that seems like a huge learning experience. And right there, I think you have proved that you are comfortable, having to do something out of the box. What about seasonal photography, Emma? When it comes to outdoor photography, what energizes you the most?
Yeah, so this is funny you bring this up because actually next week I'm doing like a full summer shoot that's outdoors. And I always really enjoy doing that. The light is different when you mix natural light and artificial. And I really like the look of that. And that's kind of like the only way that I've been able to achieve a specific look. For example, I did a lot of work with my friend Ellie. She has this floral brand in Miami called Coma, and we did a ton of work outside in her backyard in Miami. And it was so cool because you have like these natural shadows and reflections. So I really love going outdoors. I think that I started off doing most of my portraits outdoors with natural light. And sometimes that's still necessary. I really like doing that. I think that it's simple and beautiful. There's nothing like it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as far as the seasons, is there like a different perspective that, you feel, it brings to the dynamics? And obviously each season is different, but is there one that's your favorite more than the other?
I would say like spring and summer, just because there's longer days. And so it's not as stressful as a winter day, and not as unpleasant as being outside. But I also will say that there's nothing like California light. Like we would always go out there and do shoots because there's just nothing like it. I don't know. It's just a lot warmer than the East Coast. So I'm a West Coast lighting gal. If I could go to LA and shoot, I would.
Okay. What about autumn?
I feel like you could still get a lot of nice light. I don't know. I feel like spring and summer I'm very gung ho about. In winter I'm like not really. But I can't think of any like fall outdoor shoots that would differ that much. Yeah.
Okay. But aside from the light, does the color, the fall leaves and all of that,
Yeah.
does it just, bring or help portray a different Emma Fishman to the world?
I don't know about that, but I definitely, one photo comes to mind. I forgot her. It was a Broadway actress, I believe, and we did a shoot in Central Park in the fall. And there's nothing like that. We're all, like the East Coast in the fall is really beautiful. So that was great. And all the colors, I think it like happened to work with her coat that she wore. It was a really nice photo. So that specifically, yes, fall was good.
Okay. So am I hearing that, like personal portraiture is kind of your, that's where your heart and mind is? Although, you do focus and you do a lot with food, you do a lot with photographing other things, say someone has like a boutique, you just want to put their work up and things like that. But what about nature? Is that like something that you wish you would do more of?
No, I feel like that was very clear. Like even when I was in college, I was like, I am not Ansel Adams. I I have never found that much inspiration from nature. Not to say that like I love doing outdoor shoots like we just talked about. So I feel like that's where I really get inspired by, and also like I said, lighting, like specifically California, which that counts as nature. So I do enjoy doing that, but specifically like nature photography, I feel like I never got into.
Okay. And as a professional photographer, how do you feel when it comes to photography in your personal life? Do you feel the same kind of enthusiasm? Do you shy away from the camera? And I already heard you say there's very little of family pictures in the house.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I am my little sister's Instagram photographer. So I feel like I started to hate it because everyone would be like, "Can you're the photographer in the family. Can you take the group photo?" I'd be like, "Sure, I guess. I'm off the clock." But I haven't done it in a while just because I'm not going anywhere or doing anything, but I loved Instagram so much. Like because it was just so fun. Like you when I used to go to restaurants, it would just be so fun to like take a photo of, the half-eaten food when you're at your friends at a cafe and the light is nice and the drinks are flowing and it doesn't, it looks lived in because it is. So I loved Instagram. I don't know, maybe I'll pick it up post-pandemic again, but for now I'm like, eh.
Well, we all have a bucket list of to-do things post-pandemic, right?
Seriously, yes.
And if only someone can put a calendar to it as to when it'll end,
Yes.
that'll be great.
Long list.
So, Emma, what are some aspects to focus on when someone takes a picture? Say, I want to take a picture. What is it that from an education standpoint you would tell me to focus?
Yeah, so I feel like the most important to me, like if we're talking about taking a photo of a person, would be the background. Like to make sure it's a nice background. Like that makes sense. And I also feel like this might be specific to me, but I'm very big about straight lines. So I feel like there's so many occasions where someone takes a photo of me and I see it and like the lines in the back are crooked. I'm like, you have to line it up and then it will look nice. Like you got to line it up. My dad like loves to take photos like this where it's like at a crazy angle with your phone. Don't do that. The straight on is nice. Also I always make sure that like if I'm the one taking the photo, the sun should be behind me going onto the person. But there's really no wrong way to do it. Like that, I feel like that's a positive of everyone having a cell phone now. It's kind of cool that everyone like can be a photographer. I don't think it makes my life any harder, like as a professional photographer, because there's things that people with an iPhone can't do. There's restrictions there, but I think it's cool that, I go on my phone and I look back to all the millions of photos that I've taken, and some of them are really artful and some of them are terrible.
Back in a moment with our guest on Freshly Forever. So you talked about people taking pictures with their phone. What about, I guess two things come to my mind. One, we live in a digitized world and all of us are clicking away. So are we missing the essence of being able to capture a picture the right way? And the other thing that comes to my mind is equipment. How important is equipment then? The different kind of lenses and things like that versus what someone is able to do even with a very best phone in hand.
Yeah, so I feel like everyone has their own point of view. Like if there's two
Mm-hmm.
people next to each other, they're going to take a photo in different ways. And that's just how you view the world. And I think that's really an amazing thing that, that's the great thing about life
The
is
individuality.
everyone sees it a different way. And I think that's a really cool thing about everyone having their own phones and being their own photographer. Um, and then your second question was equipment. Um,
Yes.
Equipment is really important for me, specifically in the studio. Um, I like, I have a specific setup that I like, and it works great for me. But it also, you can do way more than me and you can do way less than me. Like I've taken so
Mm-hmm.
many photos of food outside with no light.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the most important process for me is the editing process. I use a program called Capture One, and that to me is the most essential because it gives me a ton of control over um, specific settings that make my images look like mine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's so much you can do with editing. That's probably, going to magnify the look of a certain image, correct?
Yeah, and even like for Instagram, Visco, I love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really important tool for me on my phone.
Okay. Okay. Fantastic. What about candid shots? Say, how can some people, really capture it nicely? Some people still, try to, but, probably we are not as successful as we would like for us to be. So, do you have anything to say on that? Any tips for people?
I think that what I have found works best is just getting to know the person, making them feel comfortable, especially when I would photograph women. Like it's almost everyone feels self-conscious when someone is
Mm-hmm.
taking photos of them that's going to be somewhere. It's not a comfortable experience to put someone through.
Mm-hmm.
It's very rare that someone's like, I love being in front of the camera. That doesn't happen very often. So I feel like just making them comfortable, and speaking to them and making sure that it's a flattering image, usually is successful, makes a good photo.
Okay. What about kids? Having talked about
Oh
women,
my gosh.
like, what about
I,
kids and what about family pictures? Do you think as a unit, say when men, women, and children have to come together?
I feel like kids are so fidgety and always like their hands are everywhere, touching everything. I feel like you just have to shoot through that and hope that there's a
Mm-hmm.
good image in there. There's always going to be a good image. You just have to keep going. It's not ever like a
Mm-hmm.
one and done situation. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a especially with little kids. You just have to keep
Okay.
going, keep at it until everyone's
So
eyes are
even
open. Yeah.
oh, tell me about it. There are pictures, like we celebrated my husband's birthday last week in the family, and like, okay, obviously we take pictures with the phone, right?
Yeah.
Sitting at the table and celebrating inside the house. And yeah, little did we realize after the fact that, okay, there are certain pictures where the eyes are closed, and it happened to be the birthday boy. So that's not fun. And what energizes you, Emma, every day to be able to do this over and over again?
That's a great question. Some days are better than others. I feel like what I didn't expect with this job was the amount of stamina you needed because
Mm-hmm.
it can be really long shoot days. And that's harder than it sounds. There's a lot going on. There's a lot you have to focus on, a lot of responsibility. And I think that there are some weeks where I'm like, how do I keep going? But I always seem to keep
Mm-hmm.
going. And I guess I would say, you know, a lot of people don't they think that my job is very glamorous, which there are parts of
Mm-hmm.
glamour. Like when I first started, I got to go to Lake Como for like 2 weeks. Like right when I
Mm-hmm.
first started, I was
Uh-huh.
like, it's never gonna get better than this. Which honestly, it didn't. But I feel like people are like, you go shoot all these fancy restaurants and you do this. And the reality of it is, some days I'm shooting clogs and
Mm-hmm.
weird products And
Mm-hmm.
other days I'm shooting on the floor of restaurants where everyone's yelling at me and I'm in the way. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not some days are better than others. But then there are days where you finish and you're exhausted and you look back at the film and you're like, this looks really good. Like last week,
Mm-hmm.
we were shooting and I was like, wow, this looks really good. We did a great job. This looks great. Food looks great. The
Mm-hmm.
props are great. The lighting's great. And so I think that's what keeps me going is not the days where I'm getting yelled at on the floor, but the days where you stand back and you're like, I did a good job. This looks great.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. But what about temperament then for an individual? How significant is that?
That's hard. I mean, I think so. As a photo editor, I was on sets with a lot of different people, and managing those expectations and all of those different people was a really important skill, but it was a hard skill. Like, for example, we had these crazy Thanksgiving shoots where it was like so many different schedules, so many different editors, so many different, photographers. There were three different food stylists. Like
Mm-hmm.
dealing with all of those people and all of their expectations is a really hard thing to do. And I also feel like I've learned that women are given a lot less leeway than men in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've worked with people who are childish and demanding and I don't think I've ever come across a woman photographer who's like that, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've
Mm-hmm.
never come across a woman who is disrespectful or, you know, harsh or aggressive in any way, and I think it's because we're not given that, space to do
Mm-hmm.
that. Not that I would ever
Mm-hmm.
do that, but it's a little unbalanced there.
Well, I think as a society, we all need to, I think, revisit that aspect. And
Yeah.
I think living in America, we all think, or the outside world tends to think, oh, America is so progressive, or, world
No.
over, the Western world is so progressive. But it's not,
No.
like when I was like you, or probably slightly younger than you, at least up until college, I was living in India, and that's where I grew up. And it's been over 2 decades for me here in the States. I have seen different sides of life here, and it's just very interesting. But every day is a learning journey. That's what I tell myself. And I just learn to cope with things and I move on. But I think some people face it more than others. And I think as a society, we just need to definitely um, go a long way
Yeah.
world over on that aspect. And I'm glad you talked about it. So, to be successful, Emma, as a photographer and make a living out of doing it, what should students go after? What is it that they need to focus on? Say, if someone thinks, hey, I want to be like Emma and that's what I want to do because I'm passionate about it, and say, there may be another kid in school that has done so well in art reflections and wants to be in visual media. What is your message to them?
So I've actually been talking to a ton of college kids who have been reaching out, and I feel like everyone kind of asks the same questions, which is great. And I'm happy to help.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it still feels weird. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, and it's funny that these kids think I do. But I feel like I always give the advice of I wish that someone had told me that no adult really knows what they're doing. Like I got into my job and I was like, wow, all these people are really just faking it till they make it. And you obviously learn about your field, but at the end of the day, everyone has insecurities
Mm-hmm.
and you know, their own issues that they bring to the table. And I think that there's this expectation on younger kids that they need to have everything figured out when they go into their job and they need to have this level of like perfection in order to grow, and that's just not true. Like you need to ask questions, you need to explore. I asked so many questions and I made sure to ask those questions, get the answer, and then not ask them again unless I was really having trouble with something, just so that I could show my superiors that I could handle day-to-day tasks on my own, and that
Mm-hmm.
I was interested and engaged with learning.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would say to college kids. And also I think hands-on experience is really important. Like I think that YouTube is a great tool. I would be nowhere without YouTube, but also just being somewhere and shooting and trying things and failing is the whole point. That's how you get better and figure yourself out.
So visual media, as far as say the curriculum that they need to go after from an academia standpoint, that's the one that one should go after and pursue, right? To be able to do something at a professional level.
I'm not sure. I feel like I've been having a lot of questions about education lately and education in this country and art school. Like I was fortunate enough to go and to pay for that. But I don't know if it's really necessary because I know a ton of really successful photographers who didn't go to school for that and started as photo assistants for really big photographers and then, kind of got more jobs, more connections. This industry is very small, especially when it gets to food. It's a really, everyone knows everyone. And you can get a lot of connections through that.
Okay, perfect. And I'm glad you pointed out that, it's not necessary for someone to literally focus on it, right, when they are in college, but they can still pursue it. And that's a good aspect that we discussed. What about building a brand or business out of someone's interest in photography? And you do, as I understand, you do freelance other than your day job, correct?
Yeah, I think I'm very at the beginning I wasn't very particular about it, and now I think I've become more as my schedule has filled up, I'm very particular about what I take on and what I don't. I think that was really hard at first. Like I wanted to say yes to everything. You don't have to say yes to everything. It's okay. I'm still trying to build my brand and figure out who I am. So I don't know if I have the best advice, but I think just posting on Instagram, I know I'm bringing this up again, really helped me. And which is weird because it's social media, but it was really fun to play around. And then, I got a decent following. I don't know why, but I think that social media is really amazing in that way. And especially now too, like TikTok, which I don't film TikToks. I just spend hours on it scrolling. But I've seen a lot of people and a lot of a lot of photographers be like, this is what I do in a day. And it gets like millions of likes. Like, I think that people are interested in that. And especially today with young people who are, I have a sister who's 21 and it makes me feel old because she knows how like all of that works. I'm like, wait, what? You're making like a TikTok that way? Like, I was in the Vine era. But I think that like I put a lot of effort into my website. I usually update it once a month with new work. I think that's important. And like I said before, connections are also really important. Even if someone, an opportunity falls apart or, it doesn't work out, just having that person that you spoke to and keeping in touch with them, maybe something will pan out in a year or 2 years. You never know.
Okay, so keep it fresh as far as whatever you do in terms of portraying your work, and then the connections. I think that's definitely a very good point that you brought up. What has been the most enjoyable aspect for you in your journey, and what about challenges that you have faced?
I think the most enjoyable part, which I've definitely been missing in the pandemic, is the people. Like, I think that a great part about this job is that, at least on our sets, you try not to have an ego because if you think that you're right and what you're doing is the only way, it's not going to look good. Like, it's great to interact with people and to hear their ideas because they don't see the world that you do. And I think, my creative director, Michelle, is incredible. And she always comes up with, I'm like, well, why don't we do it this way? And she's like, no, we're going to do it this way. And it's like way cooler. And it turns out looking better. Or sometimes I'll be like, what if we do this? And she's like, great idea. And it's just working with people is a really, really fun thing that I've been missing a lot, which I'm hopefully getting back to soon once I'm fully vaccinated. But it's not just one person. Every photo that you see, it's not just one person. It's multiple people coming up with something, giving their input. And I think that's a really cool thing about my job. As far as challenges, I think that the most challenges I face are within myself. So definitely imposter syndrome is really hard, especially when you see all these big photographers with all these like huge setups and, 8 assistants. It's hard to feel like I fit in like with that because I don't have any assistants and I have like 2 lights maybe. Like it's definitely hard to be like, am I doing this right? But again, I don't think there's a right way. I think that it's good to be, technically experienced. That's important. But it took me a while to be like, well, maybe I'm just not that interested. And maybe this isn't the way I want to do it. Maybe I want to have a more simple setup, and that's okay. And even now, there are days where I'm like, am I doing this right? So yeah, I think that being okay with not having it figured out and being okay with um, feeling that little bit of imposter syndrome is sometimes a good thing. I think I'm very, I think that sometimes I'm a little too humble where I'm like, no, I can't take a compliment or anything like that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges with being a female photographer, and coming to terms with that and not feeling anger and resentment is hard, but it's a useless feeling. It's not going to get you anywhere feeling that resentment.
So, having said what you did, Emma, over there, would you also call that as some of the common misconceptions that people, experience?
Yeah, I think too what I touched on earlier of like the glamour of the job is a really big one. Because when you think about it, people are like, oh, you eat and take photos of it. And they're like, that's really cool. But there's a lot more that goes into it, a lot more stress and physical labor. I think that too is a really big part of it. I think that would be my biggest misconception is the
And
glamour. It's not glamorous.
do you think do you think people also have a wrong perception as far as the hours and the time that you put into your work?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, my hours have been a lot kinder. But before the pandemic, I was working crazy hours and I liked it. Like I was in New York, so it was exciting to have this like big job. But I feel like a big realization in the pandemic is there's no the glamorization of that, grind life is toxic. And so I think that trying to take a little bit more space of personal versus work life is really important.
Okay. When it comes to photography as a visual art, um, where do you draw inspiration from, and how do you think you want to inspire people with what you do?
I think that I draw a lot of inspiration from textures and colors. I think that I've always been really interested in different surfaces. And also I'm a huge ceramic girl. So I'll work any ceramic into a photo. I find a lot of inspiration through that. But also, other people's work. I'm really inspired when I'm just scrolling on my phone and seeing like I said before, there's not everyone is inspired by everyone's work. And that's how it kind of, you know, moves forward and progresses. I think that it's very easy to spot a trend that isn't going to stay. Like, I think that when every brand you see kind of looks the same, that's when you know there's going to start to be a new shift in visual imagery. I think that's really cool.
As far as your contact information, I know you're into freelancing as well. Would you like for people to know a little bit more about you? And is there something you would like to share here? Your website or anything?
Okay, it's emma-fishman.com. That's my website. I always update it, and all of my information is on there. And then my Instagram is Emma Fishman. Super easy.
Okay, perfect. That was such a fun conversation, Emma, and I look forward to seeing more of your work and enjoying more of it. And I'm sure the listeners would too. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Good luck with everything you do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Stay safe.
Before I sign off, folks, let me remind you to send me your feedback and keep enjoying the podcast. I will see you back again next week with yet another guest and yet another interesting topic. Until then, it's Vi saying so long.